What is going on, fellow reformers? It's the Reformation Keegan, and I'm here today with another comic analysis from an English major's point of view. So, today we're going to be looking at a really complex yet very rewarding narrative. Today, we're looking at The Crow. So, The Crow is a comic that I had wanted to read for a really long time. I had watched the movie first and want to say that Brandon Lee, God rest his soul, he was tremendous as the Crow, as Eric. So, wanted to get that out of the way, but say that the movie I thought was amazing. It's actually one of my favorite movies I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot. But I thought the movie was fantastic, and the movie predicates off of the contents in this book. So, the book gives you a nice little introduction on the constituents behind the story. So you have a little introduction too of James O'Barr and you have a little bit of background on his upbringing, and a lot of this book is predicated off of O'Barr's personal experiences and how he feels inside, which to me makes the best story. So you learn in English that a lot of times the author is really themselves in this book, and that's what we would call a pseudonym. So a pseudonym is where the author basically takes the place of another name and is basically still themselves, but they just play a different role. So really, Eric Draven in a way is a product of that, and he's a pseudonym of James O'Barr's personal experiences. Granted, James O'Barr did not ever divulge himself into becoming the Crow, but the morality and the moral dilemma behind the Crow is the pseudonym that James O'Barr takes in this. So that's a nice little background for the story, and I loved it. I think each book in this longer volume serves its purpose. And what I really like about this book is you can't predict it. It's unpredictable. And a lot of times, a lot of books become predictable. And you can kind of understand in the first chapter or two what the end result's going to be. And for this, we really don't know. Because with vigilante stories, a lot of times they end the same way. They end with the vigilante getting their vengeance, their retribution, redemption, whatever the moral dilemma is, and whatever term you want to use out of those three. But they get the revenge, and then it's over. But this story adds a lot more complexities to that. So complexity in English is a good thing, because you don't want your reader always predicting everything, and you want your reader to look forward to the next chapter. So out of the issues in this, each issue serves that purpose. And I wanted to start a little bit by talking about a hermeneutic irritant. So basically, hermeneutics, it's a way to interpret a novel or interpret a book, whether it is a chapter book, a Bible, a picture book, comic book. That is the methodology behind hermeneutics. And a hermeneutic irritant is addressing the complexities within a story. And the irritant is that you can't always come to a full conclusion. And that's what I love about this character, Eric Draven, because he's not necessarily a hero, but he sure as hell is not a villain. And that's where we get the phrase anti-hero. But I think a lot of times the term anti-hero gets misconstrued due to the fact that a lot of anti-heroes are actually heroes. It's just they have a bit of an edge to them, and that's why we deem them anti-heroes. But I think Eric Draven is the perfect example of an anti-hero due to the fact that he basically admits that he wants vengeance. And he will kill anybody associated with the murder of Shelley. Shelley Webster, by the way, is his fiance that he really wants to marry, and she plays a very integral role in this, even though she is deceased. So we get to the murders, and the murders are very, very graphic. There are assaults in this murder, and I'm not just talking about physical. And Eric has to see this happen to Shelley, and this is very traumatic. But Eric also dies too, but Eric is resurrected from the ground. And the theme of resurrection is a big one, because Eric is resurrected from the ground. He comes back from the dead, and he swears vengeance. So on this gang. And what I like about the term vigilante is it gives you that hermeneutic irritant that us English majors actually like in our books, where We're not trying to find the full answer, but it ends up happening anyway by the conclusion of the story. So Eric is not necessarily just an anti-hero. He's not a stereotypical anti-hero. He's an anti-hero that we sympathize with and can actually understand why he's doing what he's doing, yet our moral dilemmas disagree with the violent acts pertaining to the situation. So Eric is basically a cause and effect character. So he goes through this interpersonal tragedy, and then he comes back resurrected from the ground, and he is going to murder. And the thing is, with vigilantes, yes, they do murder, but they have a moral reason for doing it. Even though, based off of the laws of nature, we do not condone murder, and none of us would ever do it. But vigilantes will. So that's the difference between civilian and vigilante. And the vigilante will do this in order to exercise a mental and emotional strife that they are currently going through, which is why he's doing it for Shelley. And one of the ways that that Obar does this perfectly is through his flashbacks. And flashbacks are a very, very big part of this story. And the art changes with the flashbacks, and that's another little rhetorical device that happens called multimodality. So multimodality is not just the verbal and written linguistics of the rhetorical purpose of a story, but it's also to show different art forms and what the rhetorical meanings are within the presented text. And this is a really unique perspective because we can see, I'm going to just try and give a quick example. We can see through the flashbacks, which can happen in the middle or the conclusion of these stories. They usually reminisce a more emotional situation for Eric, which is pathos. So pathos is the rhetorical impact of getting an emotional effect out of your audience. So we can see here, we have a flashback, and the art here is more lively and more colorful, even though it is black and white, and it's more detailed. So that really does a good job of serving its purpose as well. So we can see here, and also we have the crow calling Eric an idiot, which I found underratedly hilarious. So you can see how that art is a little more pretty because of prettier times and more beautiful times in Eric's life, as opposed to his inner conflicts and his outward conflicts that he has with this gang. You can see how the art is a little more abrupt, and it is a little more rugged in nature. So those were really good rhetorical effects that Obar uses, but I really wanted to also discuss the poetry behind this story. So I had heard from other people that this book is pure poetry. Those were their exact words. And I was wondering what they meant by that, because poetics can be very ambiguous in nature. And I thought maybe they were viewing it as, oh, there's good poetry in this story, but maybe they don't really have an understanding of what it is. Because, like I said, poetry is very ambiguous and can mean a lot of different things. Or when we see something that's really great happening, we can also describe it as very poetic. So I was wondering what these individuals meant by the term poetry, and I found out relatively quickly. So I have my notes here because there were a couple of quotes that I really liked. So, like, especially if you look in book one, when Eric is obviously feuding with Tintin and Fun Boy and T-Bird and Top Dollar, Tom Tom, all these guys involved with this gang, Eric's heart is described as ice, but his mind is heated. So that's a really unique perspective because you're using temperature to describe the human emotion, which we would also call as the humors. Back in really earlier English periods, such as the Shakespearean period, they would use humors to discuss temperature through the passions of the characters that they've created. So Eric's mind is basically heated because it's overtaken with anger, where his heart is ice because all of his emotions have run cold due to the fact, one, yes, he got killed. Two, he also loses his his love and his bride to be. And three, he, in a weird paradox, has run out of emotions, but his soul predicates off of emotion. So that's where a paradox comes into play here, because Eric Eric is a very emotional individual who does not predicate himself off of running off of emotion. So again, it's not that Eric's lying to himself, it's the fact that you get so despondent in your, and this is where philosophy comes in, you get so despondent in your current situation that you feel nothing, but nothing is actually something. So when you feel nothing, you get in that mind frame of you have nothing to lose, and it doesn't matter what happens, I'm going to keep going forward. And that's what Eric does through finding all of these individuals involved in the gang that had something to do with Shelly. And this does happen too with Funboy, because Funboy, it looks like, has the least amount of involvement, even though he is still involved. So Eric still kills him, obviously, but he spares him a more comfortable death, if there is such thing. So I thought that was a nice little intricacy that happens here. But back to my point on poetry, there's a really, really good quote here that I have, and it says, "There is a man playing a violin, and the strings are the nerves in his own arm." So basically, when you play a violin, it's for something very sad, something very despondent, very tragic. And that's basically what this whole story is. And if you know from the movie, you would know that these musical sounds are something of an omen of what's to come, and also an omen for Eric's own interpersonal tragedy. So I thought that was a really unique thing to go to and not endure, but to see through as the reader. And poetry like this, it makes you sit and reflect even after you're done the book and go, okay, well, what did the narrator and what did the author mean in this instance? And I think what it meant is that Eric, well, we already know that Eric was a musician, but Eric is basically playing his own funeral again, times two, because he knows that, I think he knows deep down that something is going to happen to him again, but as long as he can enact that vengeance in the limited time frame that he has, that's all that matters. And then the violin will play once again when he passes on, but his soul might be more at peace after this. So I thought that was a very, very unique quote there. And another quote that I have here is, when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. Sorrows. But see, and that's the thing, is when you have one sorrow, it's really a manifestation of a bunch of mini sorrows inside of that sorrow. So that's why I think the term battalions was used here. And Eric is going through one big sorrow, but he's also going through a lot of things that concern his inner moral dilemma that are not fully explained by the author, but it's done for the rhetorical purpose to make us interpret and to make us think and to make us relate to our own experiences. Because don't forget that Obar is writing this from his own personal tragedy and his own personal experience. So I think he wants us through these little paradoxical intricacies to look back at our own tragedies and try to relate from a sense of pathos to the crow and to Eric Draven. And speaking of the crow, the bird itself, I really liked how it was portrayed here, because in the movie, the bird is more portrayed as a leader, which is great. And it's more like a moral compass that's an actual physical compass, whereas in the book the crow is more of a moral compass. And we can see that when Shelly is getting assaulted and murdered by the gang, and the crow tells him not to look. He tells Eric not to look, but Eric, even though he's about to die, still looks. And that was, I think, a piece of advice that the crow gave to help soften the proverbial blow. But Eric does remember that the bird told him to not look, and then that's what propels Eric to commit arguably his final murder, or one of his final murders, near the conclusion of the story. So I really did like that, but I love the characterization of Eric, because he's a lot like V for Vendetta, where he wants to enact that vengeance, and that chaos is basically his peace. So I really like that. And there's another quote too that I wanted to mention quickly, and that's, "Go to hell, I've been waiting for a guy to take me there by the hand." So this is also a really unique perspective of nostalgia, in my opinion, because the crow tries to guide Eric away from this nostalgia, but the personal nostalgia of having all those great times with Shelly is what really is affecting Eric's emotions. And I thought that was a really unique perspective that was given in this story. And eventually too, I'm probably gonna do another analysis of The Crow, because um, I want to be concerned with time in this one too, and going back and forth in flashbacks. So I'm gonna probably do another analysis on this going forward. But I really wanted to concern myself with the moral dilemma of this, and I didn't want to give a strict review of it, because if you've already read or watched the movie, you already know what happens, and I don't need to keep telling you again what occurs in it. I just wanted to give you those intricacies behind the literature of the story, and why it was produced the way that it was, and what the end effects are of it. So let me know what you guys think, because I would love to even do another analysis of this one, because I think there's more to talk about, but I feel like this video could probably reach an hour if I did. So let me know what you think, and most of all, if you like the video, leave it a like. If you want to comment and engage, let me know, and send a comment over. I'll respond. And most of all, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you soon.